So I continued reading more Solo Leveling after the last video I did, and holy crap. Holy crap. I love this series, like, man. I really like Solo Leveling. I'm so thankful that so many of you guys recommended this, because reading this is honestly so fun. Like, as soon as I finished my previous video for Solo Leveling, I instantly went back and started reading even more, and I completed the next arc, up to the Ice Elves. So, yeah, that kind of says a lot. So anyways, to get right into it, this video, I want to talk about Jin, the MC. I want to talk about his fighting capabilities, what he is currently capable of thanks to now being a necromancer slash Shadow Lord, but also kind of where the story is going, all the reveals, the information we gain from the latest arc. There's quite a bit, actually, a lot of world building, and I really want to talk about it because it's fascinating. So to get right into it, as we know from the last arc I read, Jin, he got the job class Necromancer, but he managed to upgrade it with his points to be a Shadow Lord. And the Shadow Lord class he has now is able to basically summon minions like a Necromancer would. And as I talked about in my previous video, I knew that he was going to be strong, I just didn't know exactly how strong he was, because it wasn't clarified. I didn't really get to see his stuff in action. And I finally did. And man oh man, it's ridiculous, because it's not just the fact that he can be super strong himself, but his minions that he summons retains the effects and stats of when they're deceased. So for instance, if he fights a high level boss and he's able to successfully summon it, it will retain all its stats, and it has potential to even get stronger as well, because if he upgrades his shadow ability, like to be able to summon servants, he can make these servants even stronger. So let's say there's this boss that he fights that is just whooping him. It completely demolished him. Ignis, perfect example. A really good example that what happened and who he summoned. Like his first major minion he summoned, Ignis was someone that was incredibly strong. Someone that honestly in every single way was better than Jin. And even it's debatable that he is still stronger than Jin, even after the Ice Elf arc I just read. But regardless though, if he continues using his servants and stuff, and upgrades his servants technically can get stronger. So, because let's say they were level 72 when they died, and he summons them back at level 72, he could keep raising them up to where they can maybe get to the level of level 80 for them. And he can keep going because of just how his skills work. So, his monsters are improving alongside of him. So he doesn't need companions, which is kind of crazy, honestly. It's really crazy just to see how Jin now literally represents what the title means. Solo leveling. He is literally able to create his entire party by himself without the need of others really helping him, and it kind of fits in with what's been building up for a while. See, when you think about all the dungeons, like the C-rank dungeons, the B-rank dungeons, D, E, etc., we know that you have to have a certain amount of people in your party to even be able to be approved to go on a dungeon. And as we know with this, like a C rank, you need to have like 16 or so people to even be able to participate in one. It's just for safety precautions. And now that Jin is able to kind of summon his own army to fight for him, he technically could fill in all the spots and not need anyone to really kind of be a part of his group. So he can do everything by himself. And when I say by himself, I mean everything. Even to the mundane task of harvesting goods from a monster and mining, which personally is something that's going to save him a lot of effort. That was one of the big things I wanted to discuss in the last video I did, is that now that he has the Army of the Dead, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not going to play an active role in fights. It just means that he is going to be able to conserve his fatigue. As we know, fatigue is a big part of his character, and if he, gets very fatigued, it's over. It's GG. So he needs to be able to somehow not get instantly, to 100% fatigue, and using the minions like he does, he could kind of use them to rest and do the mundane tasks that would actually cause him to get fatigue. Like, example, let's say he did a lot of mining, and, in the past, before he got his Army of the Dead, it might add 5 to 10% of fatigue to his overall character stat. Now, 5 to 10% doesn't seem like that much in the grand scheme of things, But you gotta imagine, that stuff builds up. If you do 5 to 10% fatigue from just mining, that's not including fighting and all the hard bosses and stuff that you don't expect to fight, then that adds up, and every point of fatigue counts against you, so you need to be able to conserve it the best way you possibly can. So his minions are definitely helping him out in any way possible, not just for combat capabilities, but also just for him to preserve his stats. The only problem I see that Jin has currently at this time is that he has a mana problem. That's probably the biggest problem I think he has currently as a fighter, is that because of how much he focused in the physical aspect of his, fighting style, for instance, strength, vitality, agility, etc., he really is lacking in the mana department, or intelligence department, and it is something that he has been working on, obviously, but it's such a big problem he's been having, because when he uses his minions, they're theoretically immortal. Like, he even explains when he's using them, when they're getting, torn to pieces, they reform again and they're completely fine. Basically, his minions will continuously reform and be fine until he runs out of mana, which that is the biggest problem. See, to a spellcaster, or anyone that's using stuff like that, mana is incredibly important. And if his mana capabilities go to 0, and he loses the effect of his minions, it raises some problems. The only thing that he can really do to counter this, besides raising his intelligence stat or his mana pool, is by only being able to summon shadows or monsters or the undead that actually can survive on their own without regenerative capabilities. Example, we see Ignis. Ignis is someone that is extremely strong. Like, you can theoretically say that he is higher than Jin in terms of stats. I mean, it was argued even in the Ice Elf arc that Jin was like, we're probably, on par with each other, but he might be a little bit higher. If he ever used that sword against me in our actual fight, I probably would have ended up dead, which kind of proves how lucky Jin really was in his fight. If it wasn't for the knight being, I guess, chivalrous, he would have died. So, Ignis is definitely something really powerful and something that he got really lucky on. But here's the big part about this, though, is that because of Ignis's capabilities, it's able to survive without the immortality, for instance, constantly reforming. So he's A-okay, because Ignis is strong enough to handle itself. And so he needs to start focusing on servants that are able to survive without constantly dying. It's good to have a meat wall that you can just throw at your disposal and they can die left and right, but sometimes you do need to be able to have these soldiers that are relatively strong that are not really as disposable. And you can see that he's slowly building up a group like that. For instance, you have the A-rank hunter that he was able to bring back from the dead, which, by the way, that's probably going to lead into some complications in the future of the story. Because when it comes to necromancy, or the ability to bring back the dead, it leads into some new issues. Even though it's cool, it leads into some moral issues. Because he did technically desecrate someone's body, bring them back from the dead, and is using their soul for his bidding. And when he sends them to nothingness, what is he really doing to them? Is he putting them into eternal abyss? Like, what is really happening to the soul that he sends away? So when you think about it, Jin is playing a very dangerous game, at least morally. And it makes you wonder if anyone from, the guild will notice what he has done to that A-rank hunter, and how will they feel about that? Will they actually seek to target him, or will something else happen? Which, by the way, it seems like the spirits that he summons back do retain their personality. Maybe not fully, but they do overall retain how they normally acted. For instance, the A-rank hunter was kind of like a dummy, and you can see that he isn't all there in the head when he fights, and, you see a bunch of little moments to where the spirits kind of interact, and Ignis kind of gets exhausted and he walks away, which shows that these spirits are not necessarily just robots, like just spirits that mindlessly charge. They do have their own emotions, which kind of goes along more with Ignis and how or why he follows Jin to such a degree. Because when you think about the fight and what Jin said to him before he summoned him, the final attempt, he's like, you've been following and watching over an empty throne for a very long time. Why don't you protect me instead? And then he got summoned. It makes you really wonder if the reason why he was even summoned in the first place and he became a spirit is because he accepted Jin. He's like, okay, fine, I will accept you and I will follow you. And so it shows that, there is a personality. And I wonder if that's going to play any major role upcoming in the future. Which, by the way, speaking of personality, the I-Self boss. Now, that came at a big shock to me. Apparently, these monsters, they do have personalities. I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer after Ignis, but we see an I-Self legitimately communicate with Jin in the latest arc I read. And it's something that we haven't seen before. From everything we have seen previously, we have never seen it. It was the first time it has happened. And looking at the dialogue and everything that we learned from the entity, is that apparently Jin is not technically a target for these monsters. Like, example, when these monsters have humans enter their dungeon, or hunters, they have these voices that are constantly talking to them, telling them that they need to get rid of the humans, get rid of the threat. It's kind of similar to the system that Jin is constantly hearing from since he became a player. And the voices don't tell them to really target him, and so they're like, look, we don't need to kill you, we can leave you alone and all that, just let us kill them and we'll be on our way. Which shows that these monsters aren't necessarily heartless. Like, they're doing it because they're being forced to by the system and they have to do it. And so that's the kind of crazy part about this. It makes me really wonder if these entities, like these monsters within a dungeon, are they truly real, or are they like robots, like AI being controlled by some form of system? Because you could see when Jim was starting to ask about what their motive is, why they're doing their things they're doing, time, like, skips back. It repeats itself. It's kind of like a program, like an AI that was refreshed to completely forget everything, and been brought back to a certain state and point with its save state. That's kind of what it looked like to me. And so I do wonder if these monsters, even though they have their own will, it seems, if they are necessarily not fully in control. They're being controlled by this other entity, this god, that's kind of sending them there to attack humans. Maybe the system itself is what is doing this and is keeping everything corrected, and that could be what happened there. And I think the reason why Jin wasn't able to bring back the I-Self in the first place was probably because of him wanting to ask maybe that entity questions, and the system didn't want to allow it. I feel like there's more going along the lines with the system than meets the eye. I feel like there is definitely some hidden things that's watching Jin and allowing him to do the things he is actually truly capable of. Which, by the way, this leads to the next thing. Now that we know these entities do have personalities, it makes me wonder what was that statue at the beginning of the story, and you know, the first chapters and all that, the first arc of the story. It makes me wonder if those statues are the true lords of the system, or are they also just lower tier beings compared to whatever's truly controlling everything? Because now knowing that they have their own dialogue, language, and stuff, I do wonder if that creature that was following Jin and all that and smiling and stomping on people actually has a personality. There's probably a lot more going on now than meets the eye. Which, by the way, speaking of monsters, we do know that monsters can actually come through a gate if a gate is not cleared and take over portions of the world. For instance, an S-Class gate basically is a calamity to where it completely can destroy an entire ecosystem on the planet. And apparently this island near Japan has been completely taken over by these large colony ants that came out of a gate. And it's an S-rank gate, obviously. And apparently these S-rank hunters, they could not even deal with it. They just abandoned the island, they left it be. And the final chapter I read, before making this video, apparently the ants are actually starting to mutate to where they can actually fly over the ocean to get into civilization, which is actually scary, because this means that it's a real threat now. A lot of civilians are going to get injured, so I wonder if the S-Class rank, you know, hunters are going to have to work together to be able to bring down these ants on that island. I think Jin's probably going to have to get involved. But yeah, that's pretty much the arc. There's a lot of good stuff. I'm excited to see where it's going to go. I'm excited with the new character interactions, the female character that's introduced, etc. I want to see where the story is going. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.